right, good evening. So, just real quick, I am, as Greg said, my name is Przybylski. I have a notoriously difficult and hard to spell last name, so I will make certain tonight that everybody in this room remembers who I am. So, my brother, he is a DARE officer for, teaches kids about drug and gang resistance. He goes and tells the kids, okay everybody, it's Officer Przybylski. That's sh, like you're telling everyone to be quiet. Bill, like you're asking for money. And ski, like you're skiing. Great place to do that in Utah. So, I have been in the game industry now for 10 years. I started in the industry as a designer for board games. And then I took that and created a digital version of my board game and founded D20 Studios. Launched that game. We actually just celebrated our 7-year anniversary running as a game and live service last Friday. So it was a pretty huge deal. In addition to that, I served as worked at Electronic Arts as a game producer for AAA mobile space. And recently, I have left Electronic Arts, and I'm now once again pursuing the indie dream, this time full-time, and this time with a plan. And so what I hope to share with everyone today is a compare-contrast, as Greg had said, teaching about what I learned my first time around and what I hope to do differently this time around to create a business I can sustain and have a long and wonderful success with. So, start with this. So, at a recent UDEN panel, Stacy, who is the CEO of Wildworks, said the following: starting and failing a business is like getting a fully paid MBA education. And when he said that, it instantly struck in my mind as something that I couldn't find more true. How many people in the audience think that failure is a positive thing? All right, well, I don't have to sell that. Fantastic, absolutely. That is the core premise of this presentation. In my experiences, I can say with just sort of a personal take that going about the practice of starting a company, building a game is one of the best ways to learn everything there is to know about being in this industry. And I would encourage those that are here taking part in this, that are looking toward doing this, to look at that as an opportunity to test the waters and find for yourself what it's like to get into this industry. So we're going to talk a little about Hero Mages. So this is the first game I created. This is actually an awesome rendering that was to be the board game art box cover, a board game that sadly never was. The game was built on the premise of a group of friends and I would get together and we'd enjoy games like Magic the Gathering and Warhammer Tabletop, and we'd play those games, but inevitably end up finding ourselves fighting over the rules at some point of the night. And at some point we just didn't have time to get into those kind of conflicts, so this game was creating the premise of what if we could just have really quick battles where the line of sight's already figured out and you can just get in there and kill each other and have fun. And this game, I took it to web platform and then later to mobile, and had some great success with it from an indie standpoint. And when I say indie success, I mean that the game made back its initial investment in terms of cost for art, legal, and starting the business, which is great. It had a lot of technical awards it won. It has an awesome fan base, and I have many great player stories about it. But sadly, it didn't work out. It failed. Why did it fail? It failed because the business could not sustain a revenue income. And the sad truth is that if you can't generate revenue, it doesn't matter how passionate you are about games, at some point you can no longer make games because your family and your well-being has to come first. So we're going to dive into some specifics now on what went wrong and what I'm going to do better this time. So the first tip: business is built around solving a problem for an audience. And to do that, you have to really know your audience. And the first time that I built the business and built Hero Mages, I did not effectively understand who my audience was, how many were out there, and more importantly, what their core needs were. So this time around, what's going to happen differently is market research to identify the opportunity, create a player persona to really connect with and understand who the target player is, then solve the problem for that audience. So this is the research. This is a snapshot from a company called UDEN. They do video game marketing, insights, and analytics. And I am trying to find within this set of data who my potential target audience is. So I spoke before about the different types of games I played. Magic the Gathering, Warhammer Tabletop, we got some RPG we played, and what is the cross-section of that? So what I'm looking for is this spot right here in the middle where these areas intersect. And as you can see on mobile, RPG has a pretty successful annual intake across the games there. CCG is great, but strategy, for whatever reason, just falls behind. And so when I looked at this, I saw that as the opportunity. There's a space here where there is not currently a market leader or somebody doing something innovative enough to compete with the big guys in the front. So my take was, what if I could combine and hybridize that genre into something that reaches that player audience, which I estimate to be about 2.5 to 4 million total, with a specific focus on the 25 to 34-year-old males, of which maybe there are about 500,000 in the US. For it. And then I created this persona. I told the story about who I think that player is. So this is D&D Darren. This is the archetype of who I believe my target player is. 10 years, 20 years ago, they were a 14-year-old kid. They were playing Dungeons & Dragons in their basement with their friends. They spent 4 hours painting their miniatures, and their motto was, "My creative expression gives rise to greatness." This is somebody who played games because it was a passion. It was a chance to express their creativity, individualize who they were, and to share that experience of going on these adventures with their friends. But time went on, D&D Darren grew up, and now he's ex-D&D Darren. And he's, as you can see here, has a baby in his hand, he's got a full-time job, he's got this phone he's checking, he's got a lot going on. There's not a lot of time to invest in this type of game. So his problem is, his creative potential is still there, but it's fleeting in these moments. All right, so how do we address that problem? Core problems for D&D Darren. Gameplay depth. So a lot of games in the mobile market space attempt to address this target customer. They put a game out there where you get to battle and fight each other, but it boils down to mechanics that are so simplistic that Darren just doesn't feel like he's getting his creative investments worth. He's tapping a button and getting some rewards, but he's not really diving in deep. On the opposite end of the spectrum, we've got a game like Hearthstone, which does an exceptional job of taking something deep, like a Magic the Gathering concept, delivering it to players in a relatively short time spent session of 15 minutes or so. But the problem is that D&D Darren doesn't have 15 minutes of time. He has what I call the fleeting moment of free time, which, as I would describe, is I go into my car, I load up the kids, we're about to go out on a little event, and I'm waiting for my wife to come join us. And my wife tends to be the person that's the responsible one. She's prepared and always thinking about what it is that we need to bring with. So I find that I have a little bit of free time. And that time window is roughly about 3 minutes. That's the time in which I play games. That's the time in which Darren plays games. And that's the time in which I'm trying to target and solve this problem for him. But the most complex part is the investment value. How do you get something that feels that you can invest in that product in such a short time span and accomplish all those goals? So this is the core problem that I'm attempting to solve with the next product, Prophecies, which is the spiritual successor to Hero Mages, carrying on that lineage of satisfying those D&D core players. It's a game that combines all those strategies and allows you to unleash your creative potential in those 3-minute windows, explore and rekindle your love of those fantasy adventures, and progress and grow to achieve greatness. So over time, you're investing in this game, you're getting more powers, you're getting more characters, but you can interact with it in these short time sessions. So that's kind of the take on learning about the audience and how I'm approaching the product differently, as opposed to just going about making a product I'm passionate about. It's figuring out what is the core problem I'm solving for that audience. So monetization, this is the big one I talked about. If I can't make games if I can't support my family. And the first time around what failed was I didn't really spend a lot of time thinking about how the game would really generate revenue. I had what I would consider is the most popular archetype to people making games, which is, I made this awesome game, it's really cool, everyone likes it now, how do I make money on it? And that was sort of the question I would posit to people I was interested in sharing this with. And the problem with that thinking is that if you've already waited to that point, you're too late. That you haven't thought through the notion of what it is to build a business around your product. So this is something where this next time around, and kind of leveraging on both the strengths of working in AAA, learning about free-to-play businesses, And also I'd like to throw a special shout out to Jeff Peters, who's here in the audience today. Thank you for coming out and supporting. He teaches a class here at the U of U called The Business of Video Games. And I had the pleasure of taking part in that last fall. And I got to say, it's an awesome opportunity. If you haven't signed up for it or looking at this kind of thing, it's an excellent opportunity to learn about business operations, the KPIs, and the revenue and forecasting that you need to set up a successful business plan. So a lot of the information here is definitely due to the learnings I took there. So we're going to go ahead and show how I researched competitors, and I looked at what they did succeed, how they failed. I took that information to generate a revenue forecast model and then created a plan around how to sustain business. So unfortunately, I don't have time to get into all the notions of the forecast model, so I'm going to kind of talk high level about the plan I had formed about the game. So the core notion of how the game economy works is that players initially are attracted to the notion of exploration and rekindling with their fantasy adventures with their friends. And from there, they go into this tactical battle, and this is where they get to leverage the strengths of their creative, mastery. I built this deck that's all about controlling people's units with mind powers. And I get to go and do that with my cards and my characters. I battle for 3 minutes, and it's off to the whatever it is I'm doing next. But I get my rewards, and then while I'm in the car on my ride over, I can be thinking, man, I got these cool rewards and some currency. Maybe I can buy some new cards, and maybe I can upgrade, and the next time I go in the world, I get a better quest. And you kind of develop this habit-forming notion over many, many small sessions where the player gets to see, hey, this was kind of fun to do this 3-minute thing, but over time I get more stuff, I can do more, I get to explore more, and then pretty soon I'm going on these epic D&D campaigns like I used to. And that's what really connects them back to it. And what's driving all that is we're creating a value proposition for these cards here. And this is what the first game lacked. The first game was all about, come play this game, but then there was nothing to buy. I didn't offer anything to sell. I have players that have been playing for 7 years, and the core mistake was not offering a product for them to buy. It seems so bad. Yeah. So the next thing was looking at, well, what kind of revenue can I expect to generate from this? Is there enough potential out of 500,000 people that I'm potentially targeting here to actually sustain and run a business? And so that's what the forecasting and models went into diving into. And so, as I said earlier, the value proposition is about the cards. All right, it's pretty obvious. All right, we sell cards. Now, what can we do with selling cards, and will that sustain a business? So, what my research showed was that to succeed, I would need to get a launch cohort of 150,000 users. And this is very key. In the launch month is the most viable part of any game's launch, whether it's a live service game or a full release product. It's where you're going to generate the most of your attention from the media and marketing and downloads. It's your best chance to get featured. And so of the various competitors I looked at, almost all of the ones that were successful had a very high launch target. And most of those would kind of do this. They would spike on launch day and then flatline. But the ones that were really good would launch up, they would get their cohort, and then they would have this kind of flat line here, and then they would sort of spike like that. And then you'd see something like this, where it jumps, goes down, and goes up, and then goes down. And what I realized about what they were doing was that those people that succeeded had a long-term plan to continue the acquisition of users, continue to re-engage them. But more importantly, they had a way of re-engaging those users with new content at regular intervals and getting them to come back to the game over and over and over again. And because there was always new stuff to get, new stuff to do, the players would naturally invest in the game and eventually spend because they couldn't keep up with the demand of grinding. There was just so much to get. So what that came down to is that if I can have 150,000 users at launch, and I can keep these retention numbers, which is prove that the game can demonstrate enough stickiness for them to come back into the app and keep playing again day to day, that I can achieve a DAU, or daily average users, players coming into the game, of about 11,000 people. And with the right conversion metrics, and these are all how the game people convert over from playing into spending, that the business can sustain a revenue of about $4,000 a day, which would be enough to sustain the team, to keep making games and be happy and deliver everybody awesome games. So that's sort of the plan that was able to get me to a place where My family was comfortable with this idea, that I could kind of prove out and show like, hey, here's the scenarios, here's the potential what it could be. And it wasn't just me guessing like, I don't know how much it could make. It could make $10, it could make $100, I don't know. And that's what is going to lead to success this time around, is having that plan. So another core part is reaching a critical audience size for launch is the key to success. I don't know, these two criticals in there for some reason. But why I failed the first time. So I did attempt to market. I reached out to various blogs and different people, and I did try ad spending. But the reality of it is, for an indie developer, traditional spending to acquire users is not a very viable option. And the short answer to that is installs for my demographic cost anywhere between $2 to $5 a user, which means that's how much I've got to pay for an ad to outcompete somebody like Game of War. And Game of War is so big that they buy everybody. So to try and advertise to get users to the game is like just trying to penetrate adamantium armor. So what I'm going to do this time is get creative about how I'm going to reach the audience. So kind of in short, those are create an awesome story that captures the hearts and minds of my audience. I'll expand on that a little bit. Some of the ways I'm approaching the marketing aspect is finding new ways to reach the customers. So one of the advantages of being an indie over a AAA is that you as a developer have the immediate direct connection with your customer. And I personally think and have found that there's a real value in having that. People that play your games don't just play them, they embrace them. They want to create within that space, they want to be a part of that. And finding a way to have a dialogue with your players is something that I think can be a very attractive and innovative space to attract more users. So one of the early things I started doing with this new project was reach out to those players in my existing cohort, the ones that have been playing Hero Mages for 7 years now and not paying me a dime because I never offered them anything to buy. And I said, hey, why not join this awesome program? It's called the Hero Mages Elite. It's a chance for you to come speak to me directly on regular intervals. We do Google video chats. We chat online all the time. We have a forums we get onto, and we just discuss game design. And I get a chance to hear their ideas and incorporate that into the game. And as a matter of fact, in the current demo I built, all of the cards that are in there are all the result of ideas the players came up with. And I tell you, like one guy had this idea, I want to have all squirrels in my deck and have a deck that's all about building this army of squirrels, then mutating them and swarming the opponent. I said, sounds like a wild idea, let's do it. And in the next build release, he had a deck that summoned a bunch of squirrels, and it was awesome, and it was really cool. And I guarantee that this will be a player that will be lifelong. He's going to tell his friends, he's going to evangelize the product because he got a chance to personally invest in something he loved and cared about and to share that experience with me. And so I think if I can take that opportunity and reach out to more of my players and kind of connect the dots. I've got a guy in France now, I've got a guy in Germany, I've got a guy on the West Coast, East Coast. And with a strong enough person that will evangelize you, you can have little seed communities that I believe will kind of grow and eventually kind of interconnect. The next part is seeking and collaborating with strategic partners. So strategic partner is anybody that you could help in the industry that could also at some point help you. One of the first places I started looking at that was on the tech side. So prior to coming to EA, I was an evangelist for Adobe. I supported them by writing tech articles, promoting their products, and during that process I got connected to a lot of people that innovated in that tech space. Many people will say that Flash is dead today. It's frequently not true. There's developments all the time with that platform, and I started reaching out to some of my partners there and finding ways to connect that technology to kind of bring new things throughout the game and help other developers see different ways of creating pipelines, which I will cover in the last slide here. Another way is just reaching out, finding more people you connect with. I have plans to get direct help with the marketing plan. So I am seeking out, that's admittedly my biggest weakness, is finding ways to create a structured market plan to have continued engagement with the customers. It's something that to succeed requires regular engagement, is kind of the advice I've been given from people I've talked to. So when you're developing the game, it's difficult to maintain a regular cadence. And so it's gotten to the point where I've started to realize there's a real value in having a dedicated person that can take and own that and run that going forward. So that's kind of the next step for me. All right, and then the last big piece of advice I want to talk about is regular new content is key to re-engaging players. And when you think about games as a service, I don't want to just create a one-shot product that I release and then let it go into the wild and then start my next project. I've taken a lot of time, personal energy, and sacrifice to get this product where it is. I intend to let this thing ride for the next 10 years. And to do that, I need to find ways to continually get customers coming back. But some of the challenges that are presented with creating content is that production can quickly create what we call a cost furnace, where the demands of your consumers, your top players, are so strong that the demand for content can often, they consume it faster than you can produce it. And then you're in a situation where you're paying more money than it costs to generate revenue, and that's a very bad thing for business. Also, client updates, if you're on the App Store, can take up to a 3-week review cycle. So if you need to get content out to your game and people have ran through all your stuff and already beaten it, you need to get new stuff out there, you could have it ready to go, but be waiting 3 weeks because it's stuck in an Apple pipeline. Also very bad.
Hey,
The last part.
Hey Ross?
Yeah.
Just one thing really quick.
Yeah.
This is a recent change that we're going to be aware of. Apple has just recently restructured their whole approval process, and they're trying to get approvals down to 2 and 3 days now.
Wow.
In fact, the last 2 things I submitted took 2 days.
So
that's a huge, so yes, they're taking it seriously and trying to fix that.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, I mean, wow, okay, so 2 days, even still.
So that, brand new.
Brand new, yeah, all right, that's something you would take into consideration. The last piece is large download sizes and load times cause drop-off. Now, this is a really, really key one I want to focus on. So one of the things that I kind of gathered talking to other teams working in the AAA space is just how much of a problem this is. Particularly when we're talking about large 3D assets, file size that are in excess of 100 megabytes, large installs, and large DLC pipelines. It has the potential to cause as much as a 50% drop-off in your player cohort. So remember what I said about spending $5 to get those users? Now imagine that of the people I spend those $5 on, half of them never come into the game because they didn't feel like waiting for the game to download. And that's just sad. So this is something I deeply want to avoid. So one of the ways that I'm innovating here is first identify the right content format. This is key. So for me, that's vector art. I believe strongly in vector art because it's something that, once created well, can last decades. It's timeless. It's not going to look pixelated or outdated as technologies change going into the future. It's also incredibly lightweight. It can be delivered at relatively small file sizes. The next part is partner with the creators of the best technology. So for me, again, this is getting in contact directly with the founders and or direct lead developers involved in the technologies and finding ways of connecting these technologies to create an awesome series of tools to help deliver and streamline the production pipeline. And then lastly, I kind of already said that, didn't I? Create and innovate a sustainable production pipeline. So I'm going to pose a question here, and that is, what would happen to the game industry if a small indie studios could rapidly deliver regular new content to their users? And this is one of the ideas, as excited as I am for the game, that got me really excited about the prospect of what this project could entail for others, is that I believe in the notion that when others can create and innovate awesome things, that it enriches the market space for everybody. You get to see people break out of the molds of what's traditionally delivered and create things that people haven't seen before. And so the idea that a small team could go ahead and produce things at the level of a AAA studio and deliver regular content is something that very much excites me. So for my pipeline in particular, I have a few partners. Daniel Spurl, he is the creator of the Starling GPU framework. It's been popularized about 4 years ago on the Flash platform and enables you to rasterize your graphics textures on the GPU and get ridiculously fast performance on mobile. Gil Amron, he's the creator of a technology called DMT. It's a dynamic texture atlas that enables you to rasterize textures on the fly at runtime. So whereas art is traditionally created where you package assets in advance into sprite sheets and then have to very creatively work with your engineering team to organize when and how those sprite sheets get rasterized in the game, this does it all on the fly based off of a defined asset set. And the last part, Chen Wang is the lead developer of Dragon Bones. It's a 2D armature animation solution that enables you to create effectively the equivalent of a 3D character model, but in a 2D space. So you get to have all the same advantages of swapping out bones, equipping items, and doing all kinds of fancy stuff without having to create a individually rendered sprite sheet for every frame of the animation. So how the pipeline works, an artist would paint over a pre-supplied template. Imagine it like a coloring book where they could see the different parts of the character. They paint a custom skin. That gets packaged into a small DLC package, and then the app detects and downloads that package. DMT rasterizes it into textures on the fly, and then Armature customizes the character. And then the result you get is a super high quality visual that's matched specifically to the DPI and resolution of the device. So say Apple comes out with an iPad Retina 4 next year that has double the current resolution, whereas traditional studios might be struggling to keep up and go, man, we've got to redo all of our art now in the 4K texture format, or the 8K texture format, or whatever it is. I will be sitting there going, yeah, vectors, do your thing, and get those results without having to do anything. So just another kind of cool thing. I will be talking more about this process and how you can kind of look at exploring that in your own processes on my blog post coming up here. So I want to end on this notion of pay it forward and kind of give a brief summary of why it is that I do these talks. What I've found is that the greatest success I've had in this industry has not come from me talking about myself or me talking about my awesome game, but rather kind of extending out to others and saying, what is it that you're working on and how can I help you succeed? And what I've seen from that happen is just the most amazing things. I mean, the story of how I got to Utah and came to UDEN in the first place had nothing to do with hero mages. It had to do with the fact that I was writing articles for Adobe and just kind of volunteering to support, get more people educated. And then a headhunter from EA says, you seem like you've done a lot of things with this technology. How about you come and manage our engineering team? And behold, I got this awesome opportunity to come and meet the EA team and learn from them and gain all these interesting insights. So kind of taking on that initiative, it kind of came as a shock to me that I had this video I posted over 4 years ago. It was called How to Start a Game Company. And it was a talk similar to this where I spoke at a local college and kind of just shared my experiences. And somehow it's become the #1 hit on Google. If you go to type in on Google right now, how to start a game company, it's the first thing that pops up. So I got this idea and was kind of inspired by the UDEN folks that why not try something like Let's Give Back. So this is sort of a plug for my channel called How to Start a Game Company. I do a weekly post where I talk about a different topic on starting a company, whether it's last week we talked about how to protect your IP. I did tips on how to get started. I plan on talking about free-to-play, forecasting, how to get your artist, how to get production started, any kind of topics that would be of interest to an aspiring developer. So that's there as a resource for you. I hope you take advantage of it. I'd love to hear what kind of comments and questions you have so we can help answer those. And that's it. So I hope that was helpful, and I appreciate everyone being here, and I really appreciate, Greg, the experience and the chance to get to talk to everyone. Thank you. Thank you.
We've got a few minutes for questions. Does anyone have questions for Ross?
So are you just bootstrapping, or what's your initial funding plan?
Excellent question. So I'm self-funding right now. Yep, self-funding. Yes?
What would you recommend to me starting capital for self-funding or something like this?
Starting capital, okay. Like how much you want to have seeded to have a runway? I would say you want to have at least a year's salary saved, so that you can sustain and not have to have the pressure of wondering how you're going to get through the day. You don't have to worry about, if I go out to this movie, am I going to be lost, or that's the safety way. Any other questions? Yes.
This presentation going on your channel?
Sorry, what was that?
This presentation going on your channel?
Yes, this will be on the channel. Awesome.
All right.
All right, thanks so much.
Thanks. Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Thank you. Thank you, Ross. Really appreciate you coming and